I'm speechless. I should have started with this story because if that's true, I'm no longer a skeptic. Okay, I'm becoming a believer. I can feel it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite podcast, Stop the Internet Podcast. I'm Kelee. I'm here alone in the studio today. I wanted to try doing a solo episode because it's something that kind of scares me, and I want to push myself and try new things in 2025. So that is what I'm doing today. I specifically did not ask any of my co-hosts to record with me. There have been times in the past where I have planned to do a solo episode and then I just got nervous and didn't actually do it. And one of my co-hosts was like, okay, yeah, I'll record with you. But I really wanted to push myself this week. So I hope that this is still entertaining and bear with me, okay, if I sound awkward or if I say something weird. So today I'm practicing the art of talking to myself. A few months ago, Rebecca and I recorded an episode reading gut feeling stories, and we had talked a lot about the difference between a gut feeling and anxiety and what these things mean. I heard a quote in the past that said something along the lines of, anxiety will tell you not to do something without a reason, and a gut feeling will tell you to do something. So an example would be before traveling, if you just have this overwhelming, scared feeling of like, oh my God, I'm so scared to get on the plane. I feel like something's going to go wrong. It kind of leaves you with a question like, why do I feel this way? What is happening? Whereas a gut feeling is more like, do not get on the plane. Or do not take that road, take this other road instead. I guess that's not even a good example because as I'm saying that, I feel like you could make the case for both sides. But now I can't think of one example that I can't like see both sides of. But basically it's like anxiety leaves you with a question and tells you to not do something, and a gut feeling tells you, like, kind of gives you like an answer or gives you an action item. So when Rebecca and I were talking about this, we did an episode where we read gut feeling stories, and because of our discussion, we didn't really get through too many of them. And I was like, I have so many more. And she was like, oh, you should just do another episode where you read all of them. And I was like, okay, I'll try. It always happens like that when I'm writing the podcast episodes and I'm gathering stories. I always feel like we're not going to have enough. And then I will literally fill like 7 pages and we get through like half a page of stories. And this episode was a good example because I had too many stories to count. I actually found all of these stories on a YouTube short and I was reading all the comments and I screenshotted all of the interesting ones. And I have 128 screenshots, and some of them have 2 stories in one screenshot. So I'm just going to dive into them and just start reading them and just hyperfixate on woo-woo ideas. I feel like one of the problems with me is that I am such a skeptic, and growing up I was like so woo-woo and I believed like all these crazy stories, and then as I got older the skepticism just kicked in and there's so many stories that I do not believe, and unless the person is like my close friend or family member, I am just so likely to not believe them. And I hate that because I'm like, sometimes I just want to believe them. Sometimes I just want to play the game, even if it's just for a few minutes and it's an entertaining story and I believe it. I feel like that's another thing about storytelling as a whole that I think is interesting. This is a whole nother topic, but I feel like it's interesting to think about like the differences between truth and elements of non-truth. Because I feel like sometimes with stories like this, it's like, is that true? And sometimes it doesn't really matter, I guess. Sometimes it's just an interesting story. So I'm really going to try today to just be entertained by the stories that I'm reading. And also maybe these will make me think harder. I have recently been listening to this podcast called The Telepathic Tapes. I think it's called. I'm going to confirm that. The Telepathy Tapes. It's basically about how certain children that are nonverbal are able to read minds, which is so crazy. And I haven't listened to every episode yet, but it is so interesting. I think everyone should listen to it if you have time. It's called The Telepathy Tapes. I've been listening on Apple Podcasts, but I'm sure it's on all podcast platforms. It is so crazy. They are basically proving through actual experiments and evidence that some nonverbal I don't think they're all children. I was going to say children, but I think some of them are no longer children, but it was happening when they were children. They can read minds. Like they can actually communicate with their close family members and sometimes friends and like outside of their family people through telepathy and through their minds. And this is so mind-blowing to me because something that I often spiral about is consciousness and what is consciousness? Where does consciousness come from? I remember I had a professor in college. It was an English class, so I don't even know why we were talking about this so much, but we talked so much about consciousness, and he was the first person that like really put it into words that made me be like, oh my God, that's so weird. I've never thought about it like that. And I remember he said something like, basically you can watch how the human has evolved from like a speck into like what we are today. And so at one point, like all living beings were an amoeba or something. I might not be saying this correctly, so if you're a scientist or an evolution expert, don't come for me. But everything evolves from cells and then it becomes what it is over millions of years. So if you think about it, when the human evolved from the ape, we can kind of see these like clear differences. But then think about from when like the ape was evolving from a smaller creature or something like that. You have like the amoeba, the next step, the next step, the next step. Eventually all these steps lead to the monkey, the ape, and then they all lead to the human. It is so crazy to think that on one of those steps, consciousness was entered into the living being. What is consciousness? Like, what makes us conscious? Because if you think about it, there's always this question of, we as humans, we know that we're conscious, or we think that we're conscious. We as humans are conscious. And then I think most people would agree that animals are conscious. Like dogs have consciousness. Many mammals, even fish, they are conscious to an extent. But then people could argue that a plant is not conscious because it doesn't talk, but is it conscious? Like, I don't even know. And then, and if it is or if it isn't, like, where did the consciousness come from? And where does the consciousness live in our bodies, in our brains? Like, what is consciousness? I have no idea. And it's so crazy to think about. And so listening to this podcast, the telepathy tapes, it makes you question everything. Like everything that we know about science and how the brain works and how we communicate, all of this could be wrong. And I think they said it on one of the episodes, or it was another podcast I was listening to. I haven't listened to all the episodes yet, so I haven't gotten to like the conclusions. Basically, they start out talking about like one example, and then every episode it just like grows and grows, and the basically powers of these people and their ability to read minds gets like deeper and more widespread and just even crazier every episode. So I'm still continuing on my journey listening to it, and I'm excited to listen. I think I've listened to like 6 episodes so far, and it's just mind-blowing. But if it's true that people can read minds, which it kind of seems like it is based on the evidence presented on this podcast, it will literally change everything we know about life, human life, consciousness. It will change everything. And the point that I was getting at is I heard this point, I think they might have said it on that podcast, if not another, where basically we believe things as a whole, and then new scientific research comes out and disproves everything, and humans have to like relearn what is actually true about the world. And one of the examples was when everyone on Earth thought that the Earth was flat, and then scientific knowledge came out and people had to completely change everything that they had ever believed about the world. And there had to be this huge paradigm shift in what people believe to be true and what actually is true. And so if people can actually read minds, which it seems like they can based on this podcast, everything about our world is going to change. Like, it is so crazy. Like, it is on the scale of going from the earth is flat to the earth is round. Like, that changes everything you have ever thought was true about the world. And that is what's going to happen if this continues to be further proven. So anyway, okay, I'm rambling. I am spiraling. I'm going to start reading the stories about gut feelings. And this doesn't exactly line up, but in a way I feel like it does, because what is a gut feeling? Like, where does a gut feeling come from? Does it come from communication from something that we can't see? Does it come from just a knowing that people have about the world? Like, who even knows? And I have so many questions, but I'm just going to get into it and see where it leads. A few weeks ago, my little brother told me he was going to his girlfriend's house. He does that all the time, so it didn't seem like a big deal. He said he would only be gone for an hour because he was just picking her up and giving her a ride to work and then coming home. After he left, I decided to nap for a bit, but when I was sleeping, I had a dream that there was a terrible ice storm, and I was standing on the porch of this house that I'd never seen before. And in the distance, I could see my brother in his car, and all of a sudden, he loses control and spins out into a ditch. I was screaming at him from the porch to slow down, but he couldn't hear me. I woke up because I was getting a phone call from my brother. While I was asleep, it had started to snow, and he hit a patch of ice and spun out into a ditch. I drove to where he was, and there was a house not too far from where he crashed with a porch that was just like the one in my dream. It was crazy, like I was watching it happen in real time. I did get the chills when I was reading that. This is how my skeptic brain works, though. Like, I don't believe that deja vu is anything woo-woo or like otherworldly. I think it can be explained in science and in literal fact, and there's nothing to question. Like, I think that deja vu is exactly what scientists believe it is, which is the receptors in your brain. You visualize something and you see it, and then typically that is translated into your brain instantaneously. So what we're seeing, our brain is analyzing in the same moment, whereas deja vu, what we're seeing is analyzed in our brain like milliseconds later than when we're seeing it. So then we see it, and then milliseconds later, our brain is analyzing it. So it makes us feel like we've seen it before because of this gap in between seeing it and analyzing it. So I don't think that deja vu is like ever an exciting thing to talk about. And I feel like, see, this is where I feel negative saying this. And I kind of feel bad because whenever someone says that they have deja vu and it's like affecting them and they're more like scared or more, I don't know, like feeling a lot of emotions in a moment, and they're like, oh my God, I'm having crazy deja vu right now. I'm like, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. Deja vu literally means nothing. And I feel bad because I feel like I'm writing people off when I just don't care about deja vu, but I just feel like deja vu is just very not interesting whatsoever. And especially for myself, every time I have deja vu, I'll almost like have this thought of like, oh, this thing is going to happen next, or like, oh, I know what happens next. It never does. It has never happened next. And I have had feelings that things are going to happen and a feeling of like knowing certain things, and I've been right about it, but never has that been intertwined with deja vu. Never have they been at the exact same time. You know, I just think that deja vu is just not woo-woo whatsoever. And so in a lot of situations where people have these memories or something happens and they're like, I knew that it was going to happen, part of me in my brain is like, was it actually deja vu? The brain is so powerful and we have false memories all the time. So when I hear these stories, I'm immediately skeptical and I'm like, but was the dream actually a false memory and like your brain is like playing a trick on you? I don't know. So therefore, I feel like these stories are more impactful to me when a person gets a feeling and then takes an action and it actually affects something that hasn't happened yet, rather than I had a dream it was going to happen and then I woke up and it already happened. Like, while you were dreaming, like, did you... Have you ever heard the quote, all of your memories are just a memory of the last time that you thought about it? I think that that's true. You're not thinking back to when it actually happened. You're thinking back to the last time that you remembered it. And I feel like that's how over years and years and years, these memories become so faded. And there's been statistics about like almost every story you tell or memory you have is warped in some way because it's almost like a game of telephone. And so when I hear a story like this, I'm like, okay, you're only remembering this story to match the last time that you remembered it. So I'm going to listen back to this and I'm going to hate how I'm describing this, but hear me out. Is it possible that because memories and all of our life is memories, like even what happened like 10 minutes ago or like 10 seconds ago, in a way is like a memory of what happened in your life. That's why they call it short-term memory loss when you can't remember what happened 30 seconds ago. Memory. So is it possible that you had a dream and your brother called you and told you what happened and you went and experienced what actually happened in real life, and then your brain was like, oh my God, that weird dream where I was in a daze like lined up with this? Or was it some sort of like deja vu where you didn't remember your dream until you actually got to the accident site, and that's when your brain was like, that's what I saw in my dream, but in reality it wasn't actually what you saw in your dream. It was like your mind was playing tricks on you. I don't know. See, this is so annoying. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Going. In 6th grade, my friend and I were at basketball tryouts, and she was going to walk home after school and I was going to get picked up. It was dark outside and I said, why don't you just ride with us? We'll drop you off. She was reluctant at first, but I insisted. I can feel my skepticism kicking in, and I haven't even read the second half. Also, all of these stories, I collected them so long ago that I have no idea what they're about. I remember them being interesting when I read them the first time, and that's why I screenshotted them, but I have no idea what they are now. Okay. She was reluctant at first, but I insisted. Eventually she agreed, and we were waiting outside the school because my dad was at the store. We noticed this car with somebody staring at us parked in front of the school. Mind you, there is nobody else in the school except for the gym teacher and 2 principals. They were waiting for us to leave so they could leave. I had a bad feeling in my gut, so I told my friend and asked to go inside. As we were waiting in the lobby, the gym teacher sees us and asks if our car is outside. We say no, and he agreed that it's weird when we told him, but he didn't think much of it. My dad shows up like 5 minutes later, and as we get into his car, the other car speeds away. They didn't pick anybody up, just staring at us the whole time. Anyway, I learned that day to always trust my gut and wondered what would have happened if I let my friend walk home alone that day. And if we didn't go inside, what would have happened? I love that story, and I'm so annoying. This is so annoying. I love that story, and I love that the friend was safe, but I also think that that's not necessarily a gut feeling. It's more just like, maybe it is a gut feeling. This is where my questioning comes in. Is that a gut feeling that in your gut something said, don't let your friend walk home alone tonight, offered to drive them home instead? Or is it just common sense that there are bad people in the world and it's dark outside and you're in 6th grade and a child can't always stick up for themselves, so they should probably do the safer thing, which is don't walk home alone in the dark? Sorry. Okay, moving on. I was 14 or 15. We were at a family friend's farm celebrating my dad's birthday. My brother and I were on a 4-wheeler, and my friend and her sister were on the other one, and we went for a ride. Everything was going fine, and much like a motorcycle passenger, I held my brother's waist until something told me to reach back and grab the cage on the back. So I did, letting go of my brother. We ended up in an accident seconds later, and my brother ended up going through the wall of the barn and landed on his back on the cement floor. Oh my gosh. He broke some bones, but was overall okay. I, holding onto the rack on the back, basically pivoted down and back up. I broke my orbital bone, the bottom part of my eye socket, shattered my nose into a million pieces, and detached the cartilage of my nostril from the bone and my face, which is now reattached via titanium plate. I went into shock and was brought... Wait, where is this story going? I went into shock and was brought back into reality with cold well water from the spigot near the barn to rinse my face. The doctor specifically told my parents that while the way I was holding on was unconventional and typically not recommended, it saved my life because had I still been holding my brother, he would have crushed my body on impact between him and the concrete. That voice in my head seconds before impact saved my life. Someone was watching over me that day, and I'm thankful for that. Wait, okay. While I was reading that, I was like, wait, did this gut feeling even save you? Because you were still hurt pretty bad. Okay. See, I kind of believe that one more though, because it's like, that is a gut feeling that told her to do an action that is actually leading to a more unconventional thing. So if your gut is telling you, don't do this extremely dangerous thing that every year, statistically, millions of people get hurt or killed by doing. Is that a gut feeling or is that just common sense? This, on the other hand, this feeling was stop doing the safe thing, which is holding on to the passenger or the driver, and do an unconventional thing, which is hold on to the back. And that's the thing that saved you. I feel like that's a gut feeling. It would almost be like if you're riding in a car and you 100% of the time wear a seatbelt and someone said, I had a gut feeling to wear a seatbelt. Is it a gut feeling or is it common sense to wear a seatbelt and then the seatbelt saved you? I feel like it would be more interesting if you always wear a seatbelt and then you had this gut feeling like, hey, don't wear your seatbelt or take off your seatbelt. And then you got into an accident and the doctor was like, if you were wearing your seatbelt, you would have been trapped in the car and you would have died. Like something like that. You know what I mean? Am I describing this in the worst way? Moving on. When I was younger, about 6 or 7, my family and I were on our way to a restaurant. A bit more than halfway there, I got a really uneasy feeling and something telling me not to go to this restaurant. Okay, see, this is a good example of a gut feeling because wait, they were about 6 or 7 though. 6 or 7? Wow, that's really young. Okay. I started pleading with my mom to go to a different restaurant, and when she finally agreed, everyone was upset with me. A day later, I found my mom in the living room watching the news on her phone looking really pale. The restaurant had been shot up at the same time that day when we were going to go. Wow. See, that is a good example of a gut feeling that saved your life. Wow. Okay, I can feel my skepticism leaving my body. When I was a kid, we had family from out of town over at the house. My mom and them were going to the movies while our aunt watched my sister, cousin, and I. But I just had an absolute horrible feeling about it, and my intuition was going crazy. I just felt death, like that's all I could wrap my mind around was feeling like someone was going to die or get horribly injured. So I was screaming, crying, begging my mom not to go and to please stay home. They figured I was just being clingy to my mom because I was clingy with her as a kid and didn't want her to go. They ended up leaving to go, and I continued bawling my eyes out and so upset. I guess on the way, it clicked with my mom how weird it was, and she decided to trust me, and they all came back home. Turns out a guy came into the theater with a gun, and there had been a shooting at the movie theater that night that they were going to go to. Literally shook everyone to the core, and they realized I was panicking for a real reason. I'll literally never forget that feeling. No, that's terrifying. Okay, I have the chills. I'm no longer a skeptic. When I was 13, I slept on our living room couch for nearly a week. I think I was going through depression and didn't want to sleep in my own bed. So one night I was getting ready to fall asleep on the couch when I had a bad feeling for some reason and grabbed my blankets and went to bed. In the middle of the night, some guys threw a huge rock through our window and it bounced off the couch where my head would have been and cracked the tile. Oh my God, what? Wait, that's crazy. I was outside in the evening listening to music, and suddenly a lyric came on that said, "Run home now," and the song stopped playing after that. What? Because I didn't have a good feeling, I ran home. Later, it was on the news that lightning had struck right where I was. Ew, that's so scary. That is so terrifying. Ew, the fact that the music was playing and it said, "Run home now," and then the music just stopped. If that is true, that's insane. If that is true, I feel like that is just confirmation that angels or something is real because what? How would that be a coincidence? I mean, I guess it could be, but that's wild. This happened before I was born. My parents, with my grandparents by their sides, were strangers to the surroundings of London. During this day, my grandmother caught a chronic cough and had a small asthma attack. The following day, my parents booked an appointment and were waiting for the call. My grandma felt uncomfortable with the whole situation being in there. She threw a tantrum when she didn't want to be present in that hospital, and my parents had no choice but to go to another one. After a few years, while casually watching the news, a name popped up with headlines reading, "Dr. Death." My parents were in shock. Harold Shipman was the doctor whom they booked for my grandmother that day. A high dosage of drugs caused the death of a following patient, the patient that was after my grandmother's appointment. If my grandmother had never felt that way, she would have been dead that day. Wait, what? She had a terrible feeling, and then she left the hospital and went to another one. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. I feel like these stories are interesting too, because I bet if you look up that name with that Dr. Death headline, you would be able to figure out that that's real. And of course, someone could have made it up and been like, "Oh yeah, I was there that day." But that is just very interesting. That's crazy. My grandpa was at a train station and took a nap, overslept, missed his train. He took another train home a couple days later, and when he arrived home, his family thought that they were seeing a ghost. Turns out that the train he was supposed to be on crashed with no survivors, so they thought he was dead. This was in the 1950s, so communication wasn't great. Oh my God, that's crazy. That's burnt toast theory, I think. One time on a flight, there was a kid that cried out loud for the whole flight, saying that the plane is going to fall down and we were all going to die, and he had a dream about it. Okay, that's crazy. If I was on a plane and there was somebody, a stranger, yelling that the plane was going to crash, I would not be okay. I don't know if I would make it, even if the plane landed safely. His mom was trying to calm him down, but he didn't stop for a whole 4 hours. The anxiety in me was kicking in, so I started to write my will on my phone, and so did several passengers. Fortunately, nothing happened, LOL. Okay, that really actually got me. This is a good example. This is honestly the reason why I'm such a skeptic when it comes to like gut feeling stories, because it's not fun to think this way. It's more fun to just believe the stories that people tell. And when someone tells a crazy gut feeling story, it's more fun and exciting to be like, oh my God, that's wild. Like it makes you think, it makes you feel something. I do think though that for every gut feeling story and every time someone was like, I listened to my gut and it saved me from X, Y, and Z, they probably have like 300 more examples that they don't even remember because they had this feeling and then nothing happened. And maybe there's something to that too. Like maybe it's, I was going to walk to school that day, but then I decided to take the bus and then nothing happened. That's not like a hard-hitting story, but you could also argue that maybe if they walked that day, they would have gotten hit by a car, but because there was nobody in the crosswalk at that moment, the car didn't hit anyone and it kept going. So it's like, you can argue that like those other feelings, those stories still do matter and they did still save you. But because there wasn't this like tragedy that actually happened, it doesn't seem that exciting. And then there's also stories where it's like this, where someone is screaming on the plane, like something's going to happen, this plane is going to crash. And then actually nothing happens. And it's just like not an exciting story. I don't know. I'm glad the plane didn't crash though. Like I'm glad that the person was wrong and everyone safely landed on the ground. Even though I like don't believe half the stories about gut feelings and woo-woo incidents, I still feel like very scared and on edge right now. And I just heard a noise, even though it's the middle of the day. My sister is here and there's literally no reason to be scared. I'm like, my heart's pounding. This isn't as much of a gut feeling, more of a sign from the universe kind of story. In my town, there is a big grocery store that my family really liked. In the evening, my mom and I were driving to that store when suddenly she remembered that she needed to grab her skirt from the tailor that was located in the different part of town. She drove us there, but the tailors were already closed. Not to waste time, we went to the local grocery store. As we returned home, my mom's phone started blowing up. My dad, aunt, everyone started calling us. Apparently, the store we were supposed to go to crushed. Some geniuses decided it would be an awesome idea to make a playground on the top of the store. However, didn't take into account that after winter, the sand filled with melted snow water is heavier. Wait, what? They made a sandbox on top of a store. Okay. That and some problems with the building caused a crash. And the most mind-blowing part is not a single child was in the building at that moment. I found the list of everyone that was injured there. It is true. Not a single child was in the store at the moment of the crash. What? That is another one of those like butterfly effects or like burnt toast theory, something where something that is like this minor annoyance, like, oh, I forgot to pick up my things and they were closed, so we'll just go to this other grocery store. Like all of that just saves you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's so crazy. One day I was in school when one of my friends asked if they and all of my other friends wanted to go to the store after school. I agreed. When we were walking there, we walked into this very sketchy neighborhood. There was a lady who walked up to my friend and told him to go home. Nothing else but just go home. Ew, that's so scary. That really freaked me out, and my friends decided to turn back and go home. About 7 months later, I walk into my grandmother's room to see on the news, in that very neighborhood, goodbye, a cannibal couple who have been taking children and adult lives for the past 3 years. And that lady, who told us to go home was a victim who escaped. I can't. That is going to keep me up at night. That is awful. Ugh. A victim who escaped? No. Why did it take so long for her to be on the news if she escaped? 7 months later? Ugh. That's horrible. That is horrible. Ew. I'm terrified. I am terrified. That's actually not even a gut feeling story. That's just like a literal terrifying story that actually happened. There's nothing woo-woo about that. That is just a person giving you a literal warning. That's terrifying because of actual things that are happening, not just a bad feeling. That's horrible. No. When my mom was young, she was going door to door delivering newspapers. That night, she went to bed and had a dream where she was delivering newspapers and a man approached her, asked her questions, and threw her in the trunk of a car. When she woke up that morning, she approached her dad, who was in the kitchen, and told him about the dream. So he just handed her a kitchen knife to go deliver the newspapers. So she felt better. This was in the 80s and 90s. LMAO. And when she was delivering the newspapers, she saw the man from her dreams. No. Same car. I'm shaking. Same car, same face, same outfit. He started asking her questions like who she was, if she lived around there, etc. She was suspicious right off the bat, and she skated away from the conversation. He could tell she was suspicious right off the bat as well. This story is also an episode of the podcast called Spooked, if y'all can find it. I'm speechless. I should have started with this story, because if that's true, I'm no longer a skeptic. That's horrible. Ew, ew, ew. No. We were planning a family trip, which included a very fancy hotel. While booking it, I told my father I didn't want to go there, so he chose somewhere else instead. The fancy hotel was bombed that night, and because we were really close there, we heard everything, and it got on the news. What? This is insane. About 10 years ago, my parents would always ride together in the family car on the way home from work. My dad would drive and my mom would be in the passenger seat. One night, near the toll gates, a truck driver lost control of the brakes and chose to crash into my family's car to avoid the other lanes with way more cars. The passenger side was completely wrecked, and it was the one time my mom didn't ride with my dad. Wow. My mom supposedly had a feeling that day and went with her friends instead of going home right away with my dad after work. That's crazy. That is a gut feeling. That is insane. Okay, I'm becoming a believer. I can feel it. My mom told me when she was 7, she had a dream about her aunt who lived in another country, breaking her leg falling down airplane steps. My aunt was coming to visit them in their country the next day. She called her aunt in the morning, and her aunt had gotten off the plane and broken her leg. So she was in the hospital. That's so weird, because I actually don't believe that dreams are... Honestly, I don't really believe that dreams have meanings. I think that, like, for the most part, if you're dreaming about something, a loved one, an experience, whatever, and it's not giving you new information, it really doesn't mean anything. And I have never personally experienced gaining new information from a dream. I don't know if I believe that dreams are like woo-woo at all. I don't really think dreams are like very interesting or meaningful most of the time, but it is crazy that people have dreams and then they actually come true, because it makes me question everything I know about dreams. Like, is it a coincidence? I don't have dreams that predict the future, but I do have dreams sometimes that involve someone that I haven't thought about in years. And then the next day in my conversations, someone else will bring up that person. And I'm like, whoa, that's really weird. I dreamed about them last night. Like, specifically, I remember I had a teacher in grade school and I had not thought about this person in years, and my family never really spoke about them. Like, they were just completely irrelevant. And one night I had a dream about her. And then the next day, my mom came home and was like, oh my God, I saw this person at the grocery store. She was checking out behind me in line. And I was like, that's so weird. I dreamed about her last night. And my mom was like, what? Like, and it's things like that sure, maybe that's a coincidence, but also like, why? Why did that happen? Why did I dream about her? And like, typically for me, at least, I dream about things that are going on in my life, and I dream about the people that I spend the most time with. And then randomly I'll have this like dream about someone from my past that's irrelevant. But like, why is it that I dreamed about her and then the next day my mom saw her? Like, what? It's just weird. I guess it could be a coincidence, or does it mean something? Does it mean I'm psychic? I don't know. I will always remember this like it was last year. I was 6 and I had a dream where people were chasing me and my mom. We ran towards a river. I know that place in real life, and it made it scarier for me. We saw some rocks, and my mom tried to cross the river by walking on these rocks, and she fell into the water. I tried to grab her hand, but she got washed away. Oh my God, it's horrible. And I woke up and I was crying my eyes out, and I thought my mom had died. When she heard me crying, she came and comforted me. That day, we supposedly were going to go to a trip to the zoo, but I didn't want to go, so we stayed home. I was still so scared. Some hours later, she told me she saw on the news that the zoo we were going to go to flooded, and my class made it out in time. What? She also said that there was a man trying to save his pregnant wife, like I had tried to save my mom in the dream, but he failed and she got washed away. That woman was never found. No trace of her. She literally disappeared. What? Like, is that true? I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say. That's insane. Also, what zoo is flooding like that it's that bad? I feel like if it's that bad of a flood, that would make like national news. Like a flood like that kills people. And also just the fact that it flooded a zoo, like that's just very interesting. And I feel like we would have heard about that. I'm going to look it up right now. Zoo flood. Okay, there's floods in 2024, 2015. Oh my gosh. Okay, maybe it is true, you guys. In 2015, it's possible that this was what they were talking about. At least 12 are dead in a severe flooding that surged through the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, and residents were being warned to stay indoors to avoid wild zoo animals that were set free by the flooding water. That's crazy. Maybe this person is writing from the country of Georgia, and that's where they were going to go to the zoo. That's crazy. I once had this dream, which was last year, and there was another little girl with me that almost always pops into my dreams. She sometimes helps me escape from people chasing me and talks with me. One night, we were just walking in my high school and heading toward what I believe was my gym class. She just suddenly turned to me and told me not to talk to a boy with glasses and longish hair. I was confused and asked her why, and she just kept telling me to avoid him and not talk to him. The next morning, I was heading to class, and a guy approached me randomly. As soon as I saw him, I had a bad feeling. He kept bothering me and asking for my socials, and I was trying to be polite and lied every chance I got. He walked with me all the way to class while he was leading the way. I remember what the girl told me and tried my best to avoid him and was literally shaking whenever I saw him right outside my classes. My friends reported him because he apparently had been stalking me. He knew all of my schedule and the things I liked and where I lived. Ew, that's terrifying. They didn't say if it was the exact same guy though. Like, was it a vision of the guy? I don't know. This one time, my friend and I wanted to get tattoos while walking around LA and Hollywood, and we found a shop online that did late night tattoos. So she sent them a message and they said to come to the shop. We couldn't find the place because it was basically hidden and all the lights were off. We go up to the door because he reassured us that we had the place right. The door was locked and there were curtains covering all of the windows, so we couldn't see anything until he came and unblocked the door. We go inside and it's super dark in there and quiet, and I immediately got an awful feeling in my gut. He tells us to come in and it's just him and his buddy sitting on the couches in the middle of the room, just watching something on TV. He tried to get us to sit down next to him, and it was really awkward, so I tried to tell my friend that I had a bad feeling, and she didn't really understand at first. We end up getting the hell out of there, and we go to wait in the parking lot for our Uber, and we watch from the darkness as 5 men come out of the shop and into the parking lot, almost like they were looking for us. And I swear I have never had a gut feeling that deep in my life that something was off. I thought we were going to be trafficked or something. Wait, that's so scary. See, that is a gut feeling. That is crazy. My grandpa used to work on a cargo ship. One day, he had to go from Ghana to Japan. While the ship was in deep water, a horrible storm made the cargo ship sink. I'm talking about more than 30 years ago. My father was having a shower when this incident happened. A shiver ran down his spine, and he immediately got out of the shower. He went to my mom and told her, "My dad has passed away. The enraged ocean killed him." Of course, we were like, WTF are you talking about? Some hours later, we got a call informing us of the incident and that my grandfather's body was not likely to be found. Wow, that is so crazy. I have definitely heard stories of people that have feelings when their loved ones have just passed, and I totally believe them, because even if you believe in science, life is energy, and energy is a real thing. It's tangible, and I just think that people feel energy, and a lot of people know when energy transfers from a living being to something else, and that's crazy. This one time, I was asleep. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment and shared a bedroom with my 4 other siblings. So we went to bed and I had a weird dream. In the dream, someone was telling me to wake up and there was something bad about to happen. So I woke up, looked to my left, and saw my baby brother halfway off the bed. I went over to look at him, and he had blue lips and was really pale, and his pulse was faint. I picked him up and hurried him to my mother's room and showed her. I told her he wasn't breathing normally when I woke up. He was really cold, and my mother called an ambulance. They tried to basically wake him up because he was mainly unresponsive, and his pulse was getting weaker. He was taken to the hospital and was fine a day later, but to this day, the doctors still don't know what was wrong with him. All I know for sure is that I saved my baby brother's life. Oh, wow, that's amazing. I love that story. I have no skeptic thoughts. Last month, I was laying on my bed when I had a feeling to check if the door was locked. I got up and saw that it wasn't, so I went and locked it. I was walking to the kitchen when I heard a rattle, as if someone was trying to open the door. I went and hid. I didn't make a sound and waited until they were gone. Imagine if I didn't lock the door, what would have happened? Oh my God, that's so scary. Terrifying. I woke up at night at like 3 a.m. and had this weird feeling that something was wrong. I just sat there for a good 2 minutes before I decided to get up and check the house. Right as I walked into my baby sister's room, I saw a spark of light and a fire had started from a pillow sitting in front of a heater since it had fallen off her bed. I immediately put the fire out and just stood there in disbelief because WTF, I was awoken for a reason, and ever since then I always trust my gut when waking up at night. Oh my God, I have the chills. That is crazy. Wow. I mean, that's like the epitome. That is like the gut feeling. That is just the perfect story to describe a gut feeling. That's so crazy. My grandpa used to always get picked up by his friend for work. About 10 years ago, he woke up and had a strong feeling not to go today. He wasn't sick or anything. He said it just felt like something was telling him not to. His friend went and got into a bad crash. He lived, but the passenger seat, where my grandpa would have been sitting, was completely destroyed and he would have 100% died. Crazy. Yeah, that is crazy. That is crazy. Wow. I've only felt this once. It was like a voice in my head that wasn't my own. I was skateboarding and I fell, hitting my head. I thought I wasn't badly injured, but a voice in my head said, "Scream for help." So I called out to these strangers to help me and my vision started to blur. They were very kind and drove me to the emergency room. It's kind of freaky, but I mean, I'm alive because of it, so yay. That's crazy. One time I was walking down a trail in the woods with my friends and it seemed oddly familiar. My anxiety was through the roof and I finally said, "I don't think we should be here." Of course, they were all like, "Oh, you're just scared of the dark." Until I said, "Really, guys, just trust me on this, please." I ruined the mood, so everyone finally left. When we got back to the road, there were police cars rolling up saying they were looking for an armed suspect that was last seen running into the forest down the same trails that we were on. My friends all looked at me like I was psychic. In reality, I had a dream where we were walking down the same trail and a man jumped out and stabbed everyone while saying "go back" over and over again. It really freaked me out. That's insane. Ew. The night before I flew to France, I had a dream that the plane crashed, cracked in the middle, one dead from the middle part of the plane. I don't know why I laughed. There's so many about plane crashes. I was so scared the whole flight. Nothing happened though. Before I did a check-in for my flight home, where you decide your seat, I remember thinking strongly that I needed to sit in the back so that I wouldn't be the one dying. It was time to come back home when I saw the news about another plane that had crashed just before my flight in another country. Crashed, cracked in the middle, one passenger dead in the middle of the plane, several injured, mostly fine. And the picture of the plane was the same that I saw in my dream. The expression on my friend's face was priceless when they read the news because I told them about my dream several days earlier. Funny how sometimes weird things happen in life. Ew, I'm terrified. I'm literally terrified. My mother and I were planning to go back to her hometown, but then I dreamed about drowning and suffocating in a really tight space. I was so traumatized that we decided to change plans right before the trip. 2 weeks after, a really bad flood was sweeping her hometown, and there was news about the train we were planning to take being filled with water, and the passengers barely alive while tiptoeing with the water up to their mouths. It was really disturbing, and I was glad that we planned to go somewhere else. Rest in peace to everyone who drowned that day. What? No. I'm freaked out. I'm going to try to do a few more hard-hitting ones and then wrap this up. My sister and my dad were driving. My dad decided to take an alternate route to where they were going. He said it was because he had a bad feeling about driving the usual route. After they went back, they found out a car crash happened half an hour after they drove away. I swear to God, it's like everyone's been affected by Final Destination. Wow, that is crazy. One time, I think I told this story in the podcast before, but it's interesting to me. One time I had a photo shoot in New Jersey and I was driving from Philly and one of the models was really, really late. So we were pushed back. We didn't start shooting until like 30 to 45 minutes after we were supposed to. And while we were sitting there waiting for them, I was so annoyed because I was like, this is such a waste of time. Like, we're all so busy. Like, where are they? Why are they not here? Obviously, the shoot wrapped up 30 to 45 minutes after we had planned. And when I was driving home, traffic on the highway started slowing down. And then helicopters started appearing basically very close to where I was. There was this major accident. I don't remember all the details, but it was like stop dead. And so a lot of the cars were like crawling to the next exit and getting off. And I happened to get off and it was so bad. I just went into a Dunkin' Donuts and sat there for like 3 hours until it cleared. And then I continued going home. But I was just thinking about if the models were not late, I would have been like 30 minutes ahead on my journey and I could have been a part of that crash. And it's just like weird. I don't know. I'm using that to think positively and be like, there's a reason for everything. And I wish that there was never a car accident and that nobody was in the car accident. But I don't know. Butterfly effect, maybe, or burnt toast theory. Burnt toast theory, maybe. And I'm thankful that I wasn't in a car accident that day. Last year around this time, I had a very clear dream that I was back in my childhood home with my family when my cat, we had for 12 years at the time, walked into the room and stood on the table in the middle, staring at me. Nothing in this dream seemed super out of the ordinary, but it was one of the most vivid dreams I had had in a long time. And I actually remembered it happened in the morning, which doesn't typically happen. When I woke up, I started texting my mom about the dream, and when I went to send it, she called me with the news that the cat had passed away this morning, just an hour before she had called and when I was asleep. This isn't super crazy, but part of me finds a lot of reassurance in that dream. It felt like he came to see me one last time. Wait, that's wholesome. Maybe I should end on that. Wow. Okay. I think I'm going to end on that one because it's kind of happy, actually. And I'm terrified right now. I don't know what I believe at this point. I am just going to leave it there. If you've ever had a gut feeling that has saved your life or changed your life, please share it with me. I want to be a believer. I want to hear these crazy stories and I want to believe them. And I think if they come from listeners, I will be more likely to believe them. Thank you so much for listening to my solo episode. I hope that it was entertaining. Thanks for bearing with me if you've made it this far. Next week, I'll be back with a co-host, so we'll be back to our regularly scheduled program. But thank you for sticking around during my first solo episode, and love you, appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!